oh my God, Jacob, get back. It's an incredible rampaging horde of people. It's very exciting. And then we were just chatting a second ago. I love your avatar. It's got a very cool, you were saying it was similar to a Disney character that
she looks
maybe we'll
like
have to that out.
She looks like I'm going to guess that they're not going to allow to have guns and shoot people. So she's fake with guns. She's great.
It's very cool. It's very cool.
We'll be with her AR rifle.
We'll be bleeping out the word just to make sure that people don't kind of sue us for copyright. It's kind of interesting going from world to world with crypto voxels, Fortnite, Animal Crossing, Rec Room. Like there really are different vibes. Oh my God, this is pretty exciting. Wow, it's like you just scored a goal. Well, why don't we start with a fairly important question, which many parents ask, which is Fortnite the metaverse? So over to you. What would you say to a concerned parent, or a parent who is considering investing in the metaverse? One of the two. What would you say to them?
Well, first, I'd separate the notion of parenting and kind of what is or is not good or safe for children to participate in from the question of what is or is not the metaverse. And I'll start with the definition of the latter, and then we'll move into risks when it comes to the former, as we see this Ariana Grande skin jumping around with her plunger gun, which is fascinating. So I have a very strong position on the nature and definition of the metaverse. I think that it is a next generation of the internet. And I think that platforms like Fortnite are kind of like the YouTubes of the current internet, but in full 3D rendering. And so just in the same way as you wouldn't call YouTube the internet, you wouldn't call Fortnite the quote unquote metaverse. It is an experience that takes place in the metaverse in its kind of final version. In addition, I think it's really important to create that delineation, because without that, you run into this risk of, what is a video game versus what is the metaverse? That if you allow for the definition to encompass everything, then the definition itself becomes effectively meaningless. So the main differentiating factor of the metaverse for me, let's get these plungers.
Wait, I have a plunger gun now. Oh my God. Wait, I can do this? Oh my God. I'm like Ariana Grande right now.
You're just like Ariana.
You can
hold your own concert.
Wow. Whoa. Did you just do that? See,
indeed.
You're way better at this than me. I just feel like, constantly shown up by my peers. Look, I did it. I almost did it.
So going back to the definition points, for me, the question, the differentiation between the current internet and the quote unquote metaverse internet that I believe the future is really going to be about is about scaled persistency at a massive state. And what I mean by this is the following. There are probably 50 others in this iteration of Party Royale for me. And, I don't think
so low, right?
Yeah, it's not very high. And if, we leave this and we want to see 50 others, we can go into another section and another session, but we're all sharded. And so for 1 million people to be part of the exact same world or the same shard right now is effectively impossible. The internet's just not set up for it. And so that nature of scale when it comes to shared worlds, I think is really important for what that differentiating factor is of the metaverse versus, again, just a traditional game or UGC piece of content, which is what we're in right now.
Wow. That was pretty cool, Jacob.
Thank you. And then I think persistency is also going to be quite important too, because one of the tricks with games is that we just reset everything every single time. Persistency doesn't matter. And I think that
well, it does matter in a story game, but yeah, it doesn't matter in most games.
In a story game, it does matter quite a bit. You're right.
Yeah.
And I think the nature of the metaverse having both narrative components as well as meta-narrative components where the community is generating stories together and those stories mattering is going to be a major differentiating factor. But I think about it this way. So, I'm formerly of Square Enix. We produced Final Fantasy 11 and 14. And in Final Fantasy 14, you enter into a server with hundreds of others, but then from there you go into an instance of your own that has significantly smaller, and you'll participate in a raid with maybe, dozen less. And then every time you go through that raid, it's the same raid. Doesn't have a memory, doesn't recall. You're just fighting the same dragon with the same group of people. And I don't think that that's a metaverse-like experience. I think that that's a video game. I'm not trying to denigrate it. I'm not suggesting that that is bad. It's a great experience. It's a fantastic game. But if we
You're saying that there's almost like a relationship between the user and the metaverse, which needs to be respected by being correct. Like, yes, you've been here before. Like, I respect.
You've been there. It matters. It's.
Oh my God, Jacob! I'm so sorry. This person's a monster. It's a terrible person. It wasn't me. I feel bad though.
Well, if we were in the actual metaverse, that would have been
right. I would be hearing like a.
I would be hurt
because it would all be over. Look, somebody wants to make a friend. That's cool.
She wants to make a friend. She's dancing.
You see, only at the Virtual Being Summit. This is the kind of quality content that we bring to our audience. It's very exciting. I think that those is really interesting, and really people don't talk about it as much. What you're talking like with seasons. There's like the hint of it with World of Warcraft and like irreversible events. There's a hint at it, but it's pretty early days for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, look, the internet is not designed for it. If you think about the way in which
that's interesting. That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. There's kind of the Wayback Machine, but like you can't really feel. Yeah, that's interesting.
The internet was created for effectively asynchronous communication. You have a file, someone at a later time downloads that file, you send a message, someone at a later time reads that message. Eventually we get to near real time with IRC and text chat. Now we've got real-time audio, then real-time video conferencing, and here we're in a real-time video game. So we're steadily building toward it. However, if you look at the limitations of real-time connections, a Zoom call doesn't really go past 50, can stretch to 200, but on Google Meets, which is what my company uses, past 200, it moves into broadcast. You can't actually synchronize all those users past that. And same here, Fortnite Battle Royale taps out at 100, and we can get to 1,000. We could probably get to several thousand. I think that Improbable has shown some.
Yeah, Improbable has been doing very interesting 5,000.
That's not a million.
Yeah.
And it is,
and there's not necessarily a path to it either. I mean, like if it's years between like 100 and 5,000, then it's not necessarily clear that it's only going to be a year from 5 to 50. Like it could be another 2 or 3 years before we get to that, or longer.
Exactly. And so the internet.
It's part of why. Well, sorry, go on.
The internet wasn't designed for it, and so we have a problem where we have to rethink the way in which we do network topology to be about communication. It's much more costly. It requires different types of interfaces than what we had up until now, and requires basically formats, interchange formats that can read and connect to this mass scale, which none of which have really been invented at this point in time.
Well, now what about, because the very last phrase you said is something that does concern me, having like worked in AR and all that for quite a long time. There are certain problems that are difficult. And to be fair, we did think that a product like the Quest was going to take longer actually than it did eventually take. So like sometimes things move faster than you would imagine. We always thought it was going to be PC versus mobile, and like we did manage to hybridize it. But if it is going to take a long time, what do you think about AI? Like basically the society that you're in has like 1 million people. It's just 990,000 of them are AI characters, whether they're AIs of us or not, but they're just a little bit easier to spawn than an actual human.
I think it's going to take a very long time for us to get to mass scale. And so the start of that becomes much more intimate than I think what we anticipate that metaverse to look like in our minds. But that's okay. And, intimacy isn't necessarily a problem, especially when it comes to something as alien as the real nature of virtual beings, as I think that we think that this can become. In other words, I think that humans at mass scale don't have a way to parse it particularly well. And so it's going to be their one-on-one conversations or group conversations or interactions that help them build trust in this world.
Well, now let's talk about your company and how you think about these miles massive interactive, or was it massively interactive, massive interactive live events. How do you think about how those could maybe bring people together in a way that's somewhere between synchronous and asynchronous? Is kind of how I think of it. But maybe that's the wrong way to think of it.
Thank you. So I'll put it this way. You participate in a concert here in Fortnite or in the Party Royale space where we are, and there are 50 others. I recently participated in the season 8 end event, and you're there with about 30, 40 others, and you're going through an experience together, and it's pretty neat, but it's mostly pre-scripted. Right? Yeah. Your only agency is actually your ability to kind of jump around, but you're not truly affecting the outcome of it. And so there's basically, two things that we want to explore and accomplish. One, how do we move beyond experiences that are just 50 people into allowing 1 million people to participate in that? And then two, it's not enough to just have them watch. We want them to shape it. In other words, the key concept of a massive interactive live event, as Genvid is working on, is that 1 million people actually tell that story together, that they, through various different formats of agency, actually affect and impact it. And that design of how do 1 million people feel like they mattered is, I think, the greatest challenge that we're going to face, and one that is going to take a lot of iteration over years to really accomplish. But what I want to happen is stories that are unique because the community told them. And so, the best That's illustration cool. For me, the one that I always go back to, is Twitch Plays Pokemon. That was a game that had a finite outcome and ending. However, the way in which the community achieved it, the stories that came out of it, the hilarious memes, were all unique to that experience. And I constantly think about, how do we create experiences where we have a meaningful story, we allow for the community to have agency in that story, the way in which it's told, we allow for the characters to be authentic to what the community wants, and we also allow for individuals to have moments where they say, we made a difference here. We affected the lives of these characters. And effectively,
I love what you were saying about feeling as though they have meaning within that story. They did something meaningful. I love that. Exactly.
And what's important for me, especially in all of the products that we're working on in the slate for Genvid Entertainment, which is our new publishing concept.
I wanted to ask you about that.
We don't have players necessarily. Like, we don't have people behind the characters. We have characters. They really are virtual beings, and we're programming the AI. And you saw this in Rival Peak, which is the show we did for Facebook. We program the AI with needs and with story goals, but the audience is kind of dictating to the characters where they should go. And one of the things that was subtle, and I think not surfaced as well as we should have, but a lot of those characters had different unique AI capabilities. So, like, some of them were more social than others, and the audience could tell an AI to socialize versus not. But if the AI was antisocial, it would really take a lot of the audience to get them to overcome that. And so, there are ways to program unique behaviors at scale that I think that we're exploring and experimenting with. And for me, we do it through video because it's the easiest way to scale, which is to say the following. Like, if I watch a Fortnite event and I'm in the event itself, I'm one of 50. But if I'm watching it on, say, Ninja Stream, I'm one of 1 million. We're all watching and sharing that same video stream together, because video stream is pretty much the only thing that can truly scale to massive numbers right now. Real-time 3D rendering just doesn't. And so up until it can, to the point of the problems before, we're going to have Twitch, we're going to have YouTube, we're going to have Facebook. And if we can find a way to allow for input meaningfully back into that video, and that's what we do with our overlay, I think that we're going to
finally got up. I finally did it.
Welcome to the top.
I feel very good about that. Maybe you could give people visibly a sense of what to expect from the upcoming Genvid work, because I think Rival Peak was kind of the beginning, but my description of it would be that because a huge number, millions of people obviously consumed it, but there was almost a reality show element. Will Wheaton would do a weekly roundup, a reality show element, a kind of survivor in the woods, and you would choose which characters you connected with, and they would be have dialogue, but also be powered by AI. But I've seen trailers or ideas for like a horror game in a cabin in the woods, and you like vote on what's going to happen next, or you like, interact with the character and you kind of connect with different character types. And I think that trailer was more of a concept, but like, maybe paint a picture which doesn't conflict with, what I'm sure you have to keep secret as you're building excitement, but paint a picture in a specific genre, maybe of something that people might be experiencing in the coming years with,
So we're working on a slate of content that they're all going to be fairly major IP, intellectual properties from comics and video games and movies.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And that part is fairly important, because what we learned from Rival Peak was that affinity toward the characters matters. And the easiest way of driving affinity is to use characters and worlds that people already know and like. And I mean, obviously movies learned this with comic books years ago.
There's a relationship that's already in place, and they kind of
exactly.
That helps.
And so that's the reason that the next slate of titles is all going to use intellectual properties that people know, characters that people know. We're also going to change a lot of the way in which you do the interaction. So as an example, in Rival Peak, you were basically voting regularly. And we learned based off of the data, the audience doesn't actually like voting. They think voting is boring. They like participating. They like affecting. So they liked playing games. They like reading story. They liked being social. And so the next iterations of this are going to be far more social. You'll join groups. You'll join factions that will unlock decisions. In addition, you won't do voting. You'll actually generate points. And this is going to resolve a fairly significant economic issue that we had. I don't mean economic from the perspective of money. I mean from the perspective of audience
incentives and stuff.
So, when you and I make a vote in Rival Peak, if it's just you and I, both of us have 50-50 economic value in that decision. But when it becomes 1,000, my economic impact into that vote is now split to 1,000th. When it becomes 1,000,000, it becomes 1/1,000,000th and are effectively meaningless. So in Rival Peak, when you were participating, you were generating points for a character. What we're going to do is we're going to let you generate points for yourself, and you're not going to use those to vote. You're actually going to kind of bid your points, to affect what happens and drive agency and be a decision maker. That's how we're going to manage the economic, capabilities there. You'll actually be able to make the choice. It'll be your choice.
And then what would give us an example of a choice, or like a way to spend points that just might kind of draw the picture for people?
Sure. So imagine, character A and B are in an argument, and we want to understand how that argument should resolve. It may not be necessarily who wins, but as a result of this argument, has their relationship changed? Do they greatly distrust each other? Will they trust each other ever again? Will they be willing to work together on future projects? And so by changing the nature of the AI relationships between each other, you change the story. And
that's fascinating. That's super fascinating.
The way I think about it is, like, did you ever play any of the Telltale games?
Of course. I was just about to say, like, it's like, because that guy, what is his name? The guy, Campos Santa, he was saying, like, they'll remember that now, like,
exactly.
The relationship will be, and he was like, if we didn't put that in, like, people didn't like it, like they needed to see that to feel like as though there was meaning to the decisions they were making, and like that little shift changed everything for them.
That's what I'm talking about. I love
that. Yeah, no, I love, and that's a great example. But okay, now I'm curious. I mean, because I'm thinking a lot about this with AIs, like how it's interesting that the relationships between the AIs being something that's changeable and something that it's very meaningful. You're right, because it's emotional. That's very, very interesting. I'm trying to formulate it into a question because it's just getting me provoked with ideas. But do you sort of see, we've been thinking a lot about AI simulation and like having a little society of AIs that interact with each other instead of just building one virtual being alone, that you need to think of them in context with each other. So do you almost think of it as kind of a little simulation with like, here are these 20 characters, each with quite complex relationships that evolve over time, both from authorship, audience, and a little bit of the AI as well, like those three things kind of working together?
That's exactly how I think about it. And I would say that the
Right.
greatest challenge right now is where that balance ends up being.
Of course, yeah. Well, if it's too much the community, then like they might lose interest after a while. If it's too much the writer, then they might lose interest. If it's too much the AI, they might get confused. Like, it's definitely a super interesting balance.
Yep. So the next titles will still be exploring this. You know, we haven't figured it out yet. And frankly, you don't know up until the audience is interacting with it and interacting with it at scale. But, you know, we'll try to work it out. And I do think that that's the actual entry into the metaverse, which is to say, if you agree with me
Say more about that.
Consistency and scale is the difference between the metaverse and a video game. The thing that was critical about Rival Peak is there was only one instance of that world.
Of course, exactly.
Wasn't mine. And so imagine when we start to tell stories at mass scale.
I agree with you. It's just ridiculous. Because that, like, if it's, but that, you know, you can achieve scale much faster by more having this kind of interactive relationship with a community of AIs, in your case, very story driven as well, of AIs. And that kind of solves the problem, because it doesn't mean that we're all like embodied by avatars. Like, I presume that people playing aren't like running around a game world. They're more like kind of observing the AIs in the game world, interacting with them, doing stuff. But like, it's not like Jacob's avatar and my avatar are going to meet up in this mile, M-I-L-E. It's a super clever solution, and it's very it's counterintuitive in a way that gives confidence.
What we are going to do is allow for you to create very simple avatars that will have what we call cameo moments.
Yes. So yeah. You know,
we
talked about that a little bit. Yeah, that's so cool. Which gives you a sense of like connection.
Right, and that we're influenced by, you know, one of our investors is Huya, which is Tencent streaming platform in China, and you know, Twitch makes its money from ads. Huya, which is China, makes its money because people buy a virtual rose for $1 and send it to the streamer as their name. So what if it's that, but it's not, you know, my name being said by a streamer, but by my character, my Mary Sue, effectively appearing as part of the show. And again, there's only one show. So
it's so true. It's so true. People want to be with like the celebrity character. Now, Jacob, I'm about to do something that you may be able to identify what it is. Let me see. Can you tell what that is? It's a Diet Coke that has been
opened. Very nice.
And we have so I just know that you also care about Diet Coke.
I greatly appreciate.
We need to create like a faction in Fortnite or something that's like the Diet Coke folks, that maybe has a little like EDM beat of people opening Diet Cokes. And
look, we're in good company. Tim Sweeney and Warren Buffett.
Right, exactly. There you go. I feel a lot better about that. Let me ask you then about I guess 3 companies. One is Facebook and Zuck talking about the embodied internet and presence and how we feel about that. And then Epic and Apple. So, you know, whichever one you want to take first, but I think it would be good to chat about those 2, because those are probably the places. It's most likely that normal people, of course, everyone's normal, but normal people first heard about the metaverse probably through one of those 2 things, that Zuck now says he's a metaverse company, or that Tim and Tim are fighting.
Well, look, I think that Mark has been thinking about this for like 15 years, right?
I think that's fair.
And when he acquired Oculus, he acquired it because he said he believed that was the next great computing platform. Now, I always thought that this was slightly wrong insofar as I don't think that the goggles themselves are a computing platform, right? Like the underlying computer is still the computing platform. However, he's right that presence and scale of presence are going to be that future, and that they're going to be highly social when connected. And so I think that he's been incredibly consistent and focused on that. And I think it's impressive. I think he's only now finding it, you know, publicly comfortable to be able to use the word metaverse. I mean, it's still confusing to people today, but imagine if he was talking about that 5 years ago. It would have been even more confusing. But I think that he's right on where this is going. I think he's right as a businessman to focus on this. And I think that of all kind of the companies in the space, he has one of the best shots at it because he has the biggest platform in the world. The thing that Tim has that's very interesting over at Epic is, and we're here inside of his world,
right?
He is the engine, which is the it is one of really only 2 tools that will the majority of the 3D rendering that happens in it. I'm not saying that that's the majority of the time spent. I'm saying that if you look at, as an example, the number of mobile titles out there, if you're playing a mobile game, odds are higher than 50% that you're playing a Unity title. Right. And so if you just think
time spent on either Unity and Unreal is 90. I mean, that is 100% of all time spent is going to be on one of those 2 platforms.
Precisely. And so he controls quite a bit of that. And it's incredibly impressive what they've done. And, it's a different competitive advantage than what Mark has, but it's still material and significant. Now, the issue.
How much?
Go ahead.
Go on. I was just going to ask, how much do you think the kind of metaverse thing, the way that I interpreted it is that it was, I don't want to be negative, but there was an element of repackaging what we'd already talked about with VR and saying, okay, now it's presence, but it's in 2D and on the screen. And that sounds like I'm saying it's cynical, but actually I felt that as somebody who's worked in VR and AR for many years, that Fortnite is a better expression of the ideas that we explored at Oculus.
Agreed.
Than we ever managed at Oculus. So it may seem like a compromise, but it's also just reality. It is better than the VR experiences we've created, and you get more immersion from it.
Right. And here we are on a keyboard like the movie Big, jumping around. Look, I think that one of the issues that happened with VR was that we conflated the ability to have immersiveness with your eyes with the ability to be part of
right.
And I don't fault people for that, but it was also, mostly a way that was used to generate further conviction in the space than it was an actual, differentiating factor for consumers. So that's where I think that the problem came from. I think that AR has a similar issue right now. I mean, I think that in many ways, crypto has a similar issue, which is to say,
whoa. We don't say
value proposition
here, Jacob.
What?
I was just saying we don't say anything against crypto here. We love crypto. But do you think they have the same kind of adoption issues and complicatedness issues?
I think that a lot of the things that they talk about aren't necessarily benefits of the technology and are more just expressions of it, which is to say the following. I can go inside of a game right now and create an exclusive item. I don't need to mint that on a blockchain, right? And so what's the value of the technology? The value of the technology is that it can persist even if the company is bankrupt, but even if the company is bankrupt, you really going to use most of those items?
Now, Jacob, do you mind if I throw a hamburger at you?
Go ahead, throw as many hamburgers as you want.
All right. Well, I only have 2 more, so I'm gonna have to really get up close.
There was an initial question you asked about parents as well. I'm happy to address that if you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think how should they think about what the metaverse is, I guess, in terms of their kids and all of that.
But what's interesting is to kind of contemplate that within the realm of social media that kids are kind of inundated with today, and kind of TikToks and Instagrams where they're spending their time mostly focused on visual appearance. And what I like about the metaverse relative to that is that it's basically safer. We can control what images come out there. Your ability to be safe is much stronger when you're this avatar that I am than you putting your photos online. And so I think from a safety perspective, the metaverse is a lot more compelling to me than traditional photo-based social media.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that, it's not going to have its dangers. It does, but it has its dangers as much as Roblox or Fortnite themselves do. I don't know that it actually differs in a metaverse capacity than what we have now. And, the benefit of centralized platforms like what we're on right now is they have a duty and obligation to keep their
highly controlled. I mean, I don't know if you saw the advert for Horizon launch about 7 or 8 months ago, where it was like, if there appears to be any discontent between two people, a moderator will appear and will like help you guys to interact. So the level of potential control is a little horrifying, but it's also a lot safer. I think that what that brings me to, because you were hinting a little bit about pseudonymity and about cartoony avatars and about like having a different persona in the metaverse. What do you I don't know how much you've been tracking like avatar NFTs, people feeling like a deep connection to their CryptoPunk, and that does seem to me, that feels as though it's getting across pseudonymity and some of the ideas around the early internet better than anything I've seen. But I think you may be a little more skeptical of it than me.
Well, I mean, the question for me is, what is it about that feeling that a decentralized database enables that isn't there in any traditional video game where hundreds of billions of dollars are being spent right now? And other than general hype, I'm not sure that there is a difference.
Well, I mean, I sort of, why don't I just speak very personally from the point of view of the CryptoPunk, let's say. So, I think that a skin in a video game obviously is something that I would want to use in that video game and all of that. And I kind of agree with you that you own it. Like, is Epic ever going to go away and all that? It's very nice of you to have a seat as I try to express this, because I'm trying to keep it emotional so that it's not, just it's me earnestly trying to say why I feel something. The CryptoPunk, I think it only is important because of the community around it, and they're validating that it's important that I have it. I kind of agree with you that there is a Emperor has no clothes moment of like, of course we could all right click and have that, but that does seem as though there's something quite different about having this ticket to be in a club where you will work together for mutual, in many cases, mutual financial benefit, because you're trying to do important things to draw attention to it. Yeah, go on.
I'm a strong believer in community. I'm a strong believer that creates meaning. I'm not sure that there is a technical benefit. In other words, you can have that same community with a regular database. And that's my point.
Well, I mean, I know that we're not there in some cases, but there clearly are like opportunities around digital fashion where things can be taken out of Epic's world or into any world you like. It is logical that the metaverse would have a database level above any particular game, right? And now, if we're on a path of centralized companies, no company will take responsibility for that because of their own financial interests. So who's going to create that?
I fundamentally don't think that there's going to be a lot of interoperability of assets across virtual worlds. I mean,
and why? Just because you think there's not enough demand for it, or what?
No,
what
makes you say that? Like this asset that I'm in right now doesn't make sense in Minecraft, cannot actually be used, has to be completely recreated in it. It's not like the file here can transfer.
That's true. That's definitely true.
As somebody who's created a lot of these virtual worlds and works with a lot of creators that worked on Final Fantasies and Kingdom Hearts and other titles, they craft those worlds with very significant attention to detail. And the idea that I'm going to go and bring this character into their world, apart from, let's say, a crossover event, is effectively.
I think you and I are very familiar with like how something that seems like a big technical solution doesn't really make sense when you take into the fact that artists are the people who create video games, right? Like that, as you say, they have great attention to detail, they have a clear artistic vision. and they're not just going to say, okay, yeah, let's just let anything into this world and completely destroy the coherence of the world. So I totally agree with you on that. There is, though, a hope, you would imagine, of a layer that's maybe not this particular aesthetic, but maybe, whatever, bald man in suit or bald character in suit that could be interpreted in a style transfer way across the different worlds. Maybe there's something like that that would allow us to have some interoperability.
Yeah,
and also maybe, yeah, go on.
Why we benefit from that as businesses, or why that is materially more interesting, is confusing to me. I'm not sure that I want to be the same character in Star Citizen as in Fortnite, or that it's appropriate or relevant. And so up until I have a good understanding of why these things are compelling beyond the notion that they should be, I'm not.
How are we going to get to the metaverse? Because the internet isn't controlled by a company, but the metaverse, I mean, is there going to be a metaverse entity controlled by the NSA / global government / all of that? Like, how is that actually going to work if there is a layer that sits above any company's game? Or is it just going to be companies' worlds, and you jump into the world that they control and you play by their rules whilst you're in it?
Well, I think about it again like the internet today. I don't go to the internet. I go to YouTube, or I go to Facebook, or I go to Google and I search for things, or I go on Zoom. At the end of the day, all I do are go to different things that are controlled.
Go to these walled gardens. It's true. I mean, it is true, tragically. Oh my God, it's janky. I don't know if are you familiar with Superplastic, Jacob?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just joined.
Or is that Googimon? Yeah.
Cool. Googimon is from last season, but yeah,
this is janky.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's not janky. Who is that? I'm trying to remember his name. The little furry rabbit character.
No, but
all right. Well, yeah, go on.
Anyways.
Yeah, let me go to some questions from the audience, and that's how we'll kind of close out with a couple questions from the audience. So one of them is, when are we going to see the next game from Genvid? I guess probably won't be able to answer that, but talk to what's kind of a way that we should think about timeline, and maybe this question can lead into the publishing stuff that you're working on and creating your own content now. Like, how do you think about all that?
We have a smaller product, not rival peak scale, that's going to come out later this year. But the real big one, the major one's going to be next summer.
Cool. That's pretty soon. That's still pretty soon.
Yep.
And will you have created that, like Genvid plus your publishing arm? Like, I guess I know you're allowed to say like Niantic is kind of hybrid, like they're kind of doing it, but it's very much collaboration. Like, how do you think about that?
So
because you guys know how to do it. You guys know how to do the best job, right?
We as the publisher are one of the best in the world at using our software. I say one of the best because there are many other studios who are familiar with Genvid software at this point in time and can do great work with it. And we are the ones kind of working with the IP holders and coming up with some of the initial concepts, but we don't do development internally on purpose, because my experience is that studios take years and years to build up, and I think of them like sourdough bread starters. They need to fail a couple of times, and they need to culture. So I'd rather work with established studios that have a track record and have a culture built in. So we're mostly working with external developers, parties that we trust. In Rival Peak, we worked with Pipeworks and DJ2 Entertainment as an example of the types of parties that we work with. DJ2 having done the creative, Pipeworks having done the game development. So it'll be similar structures for future titles. We'll find really great creative, find really great devs. We'll put them together and we'll, guide and shepherd them with the software, but use their unique ideas. And I'm not trying to compare myself to this in like an egotistical nature, but if you look at the way in which, Marvel has developed their movies, they get great creatives and directors, but they all go through that kind of Marvel method, right? Marvel plans out those movies centrally and then allows the developers, the directors to have touches on it. I think of it similarly.
Another question. What are your favorite video games? I guess maybe you can do top 3 or something.
My favorite games of all time are Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. I absolutely adore. Final Fantasy VII, which I have a very unique relationship with. I'm credited on it.
Oh
And
wow, what? That's the most famous Final Fantasy of all time, with the remake or the first one?
the first one. So if you
No,
ever played
this is
the
one of the
PC,
key games of all time. What? You must have been like 3 years old. I mean, I'm looking
so
at your Zoom photo. I mean, we've met. There's no way you could have been old enough to contribute to that.
in 2010, we announced that we were updating and redoing the PC version of the game, and that was all me. It was my initiative.
Wow, I didn't
Um,
know that. That's so
yep.
cool, man. I mean, that's that twist and kind of the death. And, I mean, the whole thing. It's like it's one of the key moments in all video games emotionally.
So that
Maybe Genvid will be able to produce, or Genvid. I always get
Genvid,
a little paranoid. Genvid
Genvid.
will produce a moment of similar emotional power that people
I'm
will look
hoping
back
for it.
on. Where were you when this character kissed this character or this character died? You know, people will be telling their grandchildren.
The other thing that I can say is I ran and founded Shinra Technologies, which was Square Enix's cloud gaming company, named after the
Interesting.
evil corporation from Final Fantasy VII. So I'm the only person in the world who can legitimately say he was the senior vice president of Shinra. Uh,
Pretty
which
good. Pretty good.
not bad. And
Yeah.
then you said 3 games. I gave you 2.
Mm.
I really enjoyed the Life is Strange series from Square Enix as well. I think that they did a great
Yeah.
job with that. I
Don't
think
nod as well and all that.
yeah,
I still haven't finished it. It
that
seems like
and
they're still going, right? They keep
yes,
creating great emotional
yes,
games.
exactly. So I love those. What you see in kind of the through threads here are games that have great characters and unique stories. And again, I joined Square, because of my love for that type of content. And what I want to do is help the communities kind of shape that narrative together.
Mm. Um, well, I mean, I could ask you questions all day. I don't know if there's anything that you feel I should have asked, but I feel like
No, this is great.
you've done a great job, and you've also done a great job to continue giving very profound thoughts whilst running around, because that is not easy. So, yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time, Jacob, and welcome to the Virtual Being Summit, and
Thank
super
you.
proud to have had you here. Thank you for all your contributions to the community.
Thank you very much.
Oh
Great
wow,
to be
you're
here. Thank
dancing.
you for
Thank you.
inviting me.
It's great.
I'm
I
dancing the
feel honored.
Macarena.
All right. Well, let's X out. So I'm going to leave the match.
Right.
And yeah, that was really cool, Jacob. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. I feel like we got pretty deep on some good strategic issues as well as emotional on storytelling, and I think that'll be super helpful for people as they think about stuff. And just know that virtual beings isn't just about like NLP or digital celebrities. It's about storytelling and emotion.